So, all right, so my name's Ron Sweet. Office hours, we'll see if we're on campus. I don't really have an office at UTSA, but when I'm on campus, I'm in the Financial Studies Center, so you can find me there. But if you ever need to talk to me, you can just call me. You're encouraged to call me. I have no trouble with students calling me. I'm on a bike every morning, 3 to 4 hours. So call me in the morning. You know, I'm just riding my bike, so I have no trouble talking then. So anytime you have any issues, just give me a call. Email me. I'm not real big on text just because I forget text sometimes and forget to respond to them. But definitely email, phone are both fine. So let's look at the outline of the class. So tonight we're just doing a class introduction, and really what I want to do is get you ready for paper one. We'll do some of that. Actually, we're gonna move some of this economics of life up to the second class and move some of that. I'll talk about that tonight. And so we'll do some overview. And Lindy, this is where I hope you might give us some insights on what does it mean to be an actuary, even though you're on the P&C side. There's a lot of similarities to there.
Mufado too. We both did the same internship.
Yeah, it's the life side is not nearly as numerous. There's not many of those, but yeah, it's a very similar career. It's a big decision, right? If you're going to start on the life side, and I don't know how many actuarial science majors we have in this class. We usually have 4 or 5 of them. I mean, it's a great career. One thing I love about actuary is if you don't like it, it's very easy to move to another career. The math skills you pick up as an actuary are very. The guy who took my place at USAA, you know, I was head of equities. I'm a portfolio manager. I'm an investment person. The guy who took my place was a life actuary. Now, what do you think the chances are that I could take the place of a life actuary? Impossible, right? But he took my place over investments. So it's a great career. One thing we're going to talk about in this class, and I don't know what your backgrounds are. I don't want to step on toes, but I have some serious negative problems with this industry. And we're going to talk about them, the ethical challenges of this industry. I think they're pretty serious. Not only that, I've had recently some personal experience with this industry that bears out everything I was talking about. It's pretty amazing. So I can actually give you some real life examples. So if any of you are working for Northwestern Mutual, they tend to hire a lot of our students. That's fine. You can argue your side. I'm going to step on some toes maybe. It's interesting. The lady from Northwestern Mutual, she wanted to meet with me. So she emailed me and said, Professor Sweet, I want to have a meeting with you. So I'll meet with her. And the first thing she says to me is, your students tell me you don't like me. It's the first thing out of her mouth. It's like, I've never met you. I don't have any problem with you. I actually don't even mind the company. I think Northwestern Mutual is actually one of the better players in the industry, one of the more ethical firms in the industry. I don't have a trouble with it, but I'm going to talk about what I do have a problem with. We're going to talk about that. That's actually one of the big exam questions on exam 1. And then we'll spend a big chunk of the class just going through products, life insurance, annuities, health. We're going to spend a lot of time on health insurance and then disability and other. All right, so that's a big part of the class. There will be math on the first exam, especially on the annuities. There's one big math question on the first exam. And then the second exam will have a lot of math related to pricing of insurance and asset liability management. So the second exam is much more mathematical. Most students prefer the second exam because it's mainly math and it's pretty straightforward math. The first exam has a couple of essay questions that are a little bit challenging, but not too much. If you're taking good notes, you'll have it. So we'll see. The health side, it takes up a lot of room because that's what your second paper's on. It's a big issue. It's a major issue. It's possible I won't talk about health insurance 10 years from now because we might have some nationalized health plan or Medicare for all or whatever, where this industry doesn't even exist anymore. And I don't know what I'm going to do then. I'll probably combine my P&C and life class into one. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that. I'll talk about that paper some here. It's a pretty massive paper, but it's a massive paper where I've done a lot of the work for you. So you'll see how that will work out. So that's the lay of the land. So what I want to do is get you a little bit ready for the first paper. Before I do that, let's look back at how the grading works. The exams are 25% each. The first paper is 20%, and the health insurance paper is 30%. Sorry, my cat, he either wants out, and when I let him out, he don't want out, he want to eat. So he's like doing all the wrong things. I'm going to start kicking him out at 7 o'clock, whether he likes it or not. All right, so the health insurance paper is a pretty massive paper, but I will help you a lot on it. You're going to see I'm going to give you a lot of stuff there. Attendance, all of that. I'll talk more about that as we get into it. Attendance is, when we have it online, I check attendance using the Zoom attendance score. I can usually tell who you are. There's a few students that their Zoom name is some strange, bizarre name. So I may have to ask you, who is writing hood 13 or something, but I should be able to tell on that. And the instructor survey, you can get 1% on the instructor survey. So let's look at these two papers. Paper is on 2 issues, so it's almost 2 papers, but it's a paper on human capital and on immediate annuities. The human capital has one kind of medium-sized article and one really short article. The immediate annuities has 2 kind of medium-sized articles. And essentially what you're going to do is read the articles and summarize them in a very logical way. All right. Human capital, these are somewhat dated articles. Oh, great. Now he's playing the piano. So that's my cat playing the piano, if you can hear that. So these articles are a little dated. I would use more current articles. I just can't find any that are as good as these articles. So I'm sticking with them. If I can find it, but I have added that the immediate annuities. I did add that second article because I found a really, really good article from Wharton School of Business that was really good on that topic. So I like these articles. I'm always looking for better ones that are more current, but these are somewhat just historical articles that really cover the topic really, really well. I'm going to give you a very detailed rubric. I'm actually amazed when students do horribly on these papers because my rubric is extremely well organized. And I may even show you the rubric tonight, so you can. It's out there on Blackboard. So I'd actually recommend, if I were doing this, I would read the articles, and then I would take out the rubric and read the articles again, so I could somewhat assign it as I'm going. If I were you, I would think of it as 2 papers. So I would do the human capital one first, get it done, and then do the immediate. And you're going to submit it as 1 paper, but they're really 2 different topics. Now you do have to do the human capital all together, and the 2 immediate annuities as all 1 article. So there's some overlap with those within each other. So, but there's no overlap between the 2 human capital articles and the 2 immediate annuity articles. They're completely different things. So you read the articles, you summarize them in a very professional looking paper. Follow the rubric, extremely important that you do that. All right, any questions? I'm going to show you the articles. We won't talk about them Thursday night because I actually want you to have read the articles before we talk about them in class. So I needed to change that on the syllabus. So we'll do it a little bit different. But I'll show you the articles tonight so you see some of what I'm talking about. All right, the second paper is not on health insurance. It's on healthcare and health insurance reform. That's why it's such a heavy topic, because it's not just health insurance. You really can't talk health insurance without talking healthcare. We know this is a big issue. So what this paper is essentially a research paper, but I've done all the research for you. All right, so you don't have to go out and look for a bunch of articles. I've already found all the articles for you. What you have to do is read the articles, and I give you probably the craziest rubric you've ever seen in your entire college career. It's a lot of stuff. And so the way this paper works, it's got 2 parts. Define the problem, talk about possible solutions. All right, and we're going to go through those. I find it, to me, it's my favorite part of the class because it's just amazing to me what's going on here. there's a really good movie that's out there that I'll give you the link to that you can see for free, called Money in Medicine. It's several years old as well. There's nothing in that movie that's out of date. Nothing's been fixed. This is an industry that is just, it's a disaster. There's a book I read on this industry. It's a fairly recent book, and that's why I say nothing's changed. And I actually have a summary of that book for you that you can look at. There's some really shocking data in that book. So it's to me, it's absolutely amazing what's going on in this industry. You guys probably aren't aware of it because you probably don't use healthcare all that much. I don't think I saw a doctor once in my 20s. So a lot of times young people just don't know this is going on unless there's something, some have some health issues, or you have parents or grandparents, you might notice it. But it's a pretty shocking industry. One thing on this paper is you need to follow my rubric as far as covering all the captions, but you don't have to agree with me. You're definitely going to hear my biases, but I'll tell you up front, I'm pretty sure I'm wrong on everything. I'm so convinced this is a very complicated industry, very complicated issue. So I'm pretty sure I'm wrong. I'm not a Medicare for all person. I don't really believe in Medicare for all, and you'll see why when I show you some of the numbers. But if you are, that's perfectly fine. But you got to make sure you address the issues that are raised about Medicare with all. Okay, you can't just say, no, I think Medicare for all is fine, and just ignore all the issues you brought up in class. The nice thing about this is the solution part of this paper is it doesn't have to be workable. You don't have to come up with a solution that Congress would actually pass. So you're king for a day. Whatever you want to implement is fine. So I'm not sure there's a solution that will work that would actually get through Congress. But you don't have to worry about that. All right. It's a great paper. I had a former student. She wrote a really excellent paper, and she was at a hotel where they were having a healthcare conference. And she walked into the elevator, and a famous person on this issue was in the elevator. And she started talking healthcare reform with him, and he was shocked. He assumed she was there for the healthcare conference. She wasn't, and he was just blown away with everything she knew. So we're going to try to cover every single issue. Now, I have a former student who works for a major consulting firm, and he does healthcare consulting. He's spoken to our class in the past. I might ask him to speak to the class again. It's going to somewhat depend on how our timing goes. And what I'd really like to do is we cover all the material. You get a good draft of the paper, and then I bring him in maybe a week or so before the paper's due, and you can throw your ideas at him, and he can tell you what he thinks about them. He's a big, he's very familiar with. I'm going to give you some of Michael Porter. Michael Porter has his outcomes-based healthcare. This is a really interesting approach. I'm going to show you his article. I think it's really interesting. I don't know if it's workable, but it sounds good. Sounds really, really good. And this former student, he can give some examples of actual hospitals or healthcare providers that are actually trying out some of these experiments to see how they work. So it's a great concept. It's probably going to rile you up. It's going to make you a disaster at Thanksgiving when you have that, that weird uncle that wants to debate healthcare reform with you, and you're going to know 20 times more than he does, and you're going to just divide the whole family. Everybody's going to leave all angry, but that's fine. I'm going to give you some really good ammunition for some good debates, but it's going to be interesting. You don't necessarily need to get into COVID. I think COVID has affected everything, but I'm not so sure that's that big of an issue. I think it's kind of a temporary thing, so we'll see. But anyway, that's that paper. I love the paper. I think it's really fascinating, and I think you'll find it interesting. The exams in this class, if you've had my property and casualty class, the exams in this class are much more straightforward than the property and casualty class. The paper's a little tougher, but the exams are much more straightforward. So this is a class where the exams, if you're paying attention, you shouldn't have any trouble with the exams. Your issue is going to be these papers. You just got to get working on them and spread out the work. One thing I'll tell you now, and I want to remind you this again, this healthcare paper, I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail in the class. I don't know how many students have done this in the past. If I were you, I would be writing a paper during the class as I'm going through the stuff, capturing quotes and comments and putting them in your paper, or at least fleshing out your outline as we go through the class. So that class time isn't you sitting there just kind of listening. You're actually constructing your paper while we go. If you do that, you're going to find this paper is not that difficult. If you just listen in class and don't really, kind of halfway there, and then you're going to put this paper together all at the end, you're not going to be able to do it. It's going to be too much. All right. So I'll try to remind you of that. Or any questions on that? That's the class. That's what we're going to be doing. All right. So here's paper 1. See how I have it organized for you. So I'm trying to eliminate the ambiguity because there's some challenging stuff in here. So your trick is going to be actually explaining the things in the article. Some of them are really simple. Some of them are a little more challenging. So this rubric's out there on Blackboard. You can see the weight. You got Article 1, Article 2. So I would, right now, what I want you to do is focus on the first 2 articles. So what we'll do sometime, probably next week, is I'll go in detail on the articles, on Articles 1 and 2. Then you can go on to Articles 3 and 4, and then we'll have a class session where we go through Articles 3 and 4. Okay, that makes sense? So read articles. They're not long articles. So let me show you the articles, but you can see that's a very detailed rubric all the way throughout. So, I'm trying to help you just get through the article. What my goal here is that you get the concepts, and I'm having you get the concepts by writing a paper, because writing a paper, it will stick in your memory much better. And these are, if you interview for life with a life insurance company, we're talking concepts that they're going to be extremely impressed in an interview that you're familiar with these. So anytime I have an article like this, I read the abstract first, and then I jump to the very, very end. And I want to see, does it have a conclusion? And then I read the conclusion next. So my goal is, what are they trying to prove to me? What is this article about? And you'll find what they're talking about here is we have life insurance and we have portfolios. So people buy life insurance and they save money for retirement. What links those 2 things together? Is there some way you can bring those 2? Because we get these 2 decisions. Should I buy $100,000 of life insurance or $300,000 of life insurance? Well, that's a decision. Should I buy stocks? Should I buy bonds? How much should I save? Should those 2 decisions be made in tandem? And they're going to say, yes, they should be made in tandem. What do you think the link between those 2 things is? Well, what's this article about? Human capital. The link between life insurance and your investment portfolio and how you save for retirement are linked together. Now, what's interesting about those 2 things? What happens to your retirement plans if you actually need the life insurance? You don't need retirement, do you? That issue goes away. But if you live to be 90, the life insurance wasn't all that important, but now you need retirement. So this is what the article is about. So figure out what they're trying to prove to you. The conclusion goes on quite a bit. Now, the appendix, you can skip the appendix if you want to. All right, it's not that important to the article. It's just not critical. So you can completely skip the appendix, but do read the conclusion. And let me show you a real good summary of this entire article. And it's this formula. I just mentioned a long formula, but it's this formula. It's this formula right here. You need to understand this formula, and it's actually a fairly simple formula. And we're going to use some of the stuff in this formula later in the class. So max E. Anybody want to guess what the E means?
Expected.
Expected. All right, good job. Wow. July 95. I don't know who that is, but good job.
My name's Brennan. I've tried to change the username. I can't get it to stay for some reason.
All right, good. So we're trying to max the expected value of something. And we got these 2 states. We got the 1 minus D state, and we got the D state. All right. The D state is your bequest. How much do you want to leave to your heirs? Okay. You have the U, alive and U dead. What do you think U stands for? What do you learn in your economics class? What are we trying to maximize? I know you had this term. You remember your curves? What were those curves? Those U curves? the U blank function. When did y'all have economic? The what?
Demand?
No, it starts with a U. So what was your U
The
function?
unity,
Very close.
utilization. Oh, union.
Utility.
No, utility. There you go. Utility function. What's another word for utility? Happiness. So this is your you alive and you dead. What are we trying to do? We're trying to maximize your happiness, but you might be alive or you might be dead. How do you maximize your happiness when you don't know when you're going to die? All right. Anybody want to guess what QX is? Well, you can look at QX. We're going to use QX later when we price life insurance. What are the actuaries worried about? Your probability of dying. That's what QX is. So we'll actually use QX. QX is your mortality. What did I use on the U alive state? Well, 1 minus QX. Well, that makes sense, right? What's 1 minus QX? That's your probability of what? Well, Q is your probability of dying, your probability of living, right? So you have your probability of living times your happiness as alive, and you have your probability of dying times your happiness if you're dead. Now, how are you happy if you're dead? Well, you're happy if you're dead if you left a good inheritance for your heirs. Okay, y'all see how this formula is not nearly as complicated as it looks. And then he has these two things in there. He has your wealth and your human capital. What happens to human, anybody, y'all familiar with human capital? Human capital, I think, is pretty straightforward. Human capital is the present value of all your future earnings. That's all it is. Now that key present value is real important. This is where students really struggle with this article. To do a present value, what do you have? You have future cash flows. What else do you have? What do you need for a present value?
Discount rate.
Discount rate. What drives the discount rate? So we have to talk about that risk, right? What drives the risk of human capital? What's more risky, a stockbroker or a Supreme Court justice? Whose human capital is more at risk? I would guess a stockbroker, right? What do you have to do to lose your job as a Supreme Court justice? You got to do something pretty awful, right? So it's pretty hard to lose your, I don't know how many impeached Supreme Court justices we have, but it's not too many. But a stockbroker, right? They're going to go up and down with the stock market or whatever. So we're going to talk about that. So that human capital has some issues. Your wealth, what happens over time? Your wealth increases, your human capital declines. How much human capital is there in the you dead state? Y'all notice what happened to it? Disappeared. Why did you replace it with? Life insurance, right? When you die. So this is part of the paper. Life insurance has a perfect -1 correlation to human capital. Can you think of any other asset out there that has a perfect -1 correlation to life insurance? Who is going to pay you millions of dollars if you die? There's not much out there, is it? So the life insurance industry, as much as I dislike its ethics, it sells a product that is incredibly needed, incredibly unique, and no one else can sell it. Legally, no one else can sell it. You can't set up a stand on the corner and say, hey, if you die, I'll give you $1,000. You just pay me $100. You can't do that. That's illegal. Only life insurance companies can sell life-dependent products like this. Banks can't do it. Investment firms can't do it. So it's a very unique part of the insurance and financial services business. So that's what this article is about. What are they trying to do? They're trying to maximize your happiness, whether you're dead or alive. And your happiness is going to be based on your wealth and your human capital. Wealth and human capital are related to each other. Wealth increases as human capital falls. Your dead state is related to your wealth. Right? If you die, how much life insurance does Bill Gates need? You're worth what, $80 billion or whatever? It's like, well, I better buy $300,000 of life insurance. No, who cares, right? Your heirs are probably hoping you drop dead, right? That's when they become really wealthy, unless you're Warren Buffett and you don't leave anything to your kids and say, hey kids, you're on your own. So that's what we're looking in this article. And what they're going to say is, and I love what this article is, human capital drives all of this, but life insurance is driven by human capital, right? If your human capital is $400,000, then you probably need $400,000 of life insurance. So these are all related. And what they're going to do is try to set this up and they're going to make some strange comments such that a stockbroker should have a lower allocation to the stock market and needs less life insurance. Does that make any sense to you at all? That's what this article is arguing. If you're a stockbroker, you should have a higher allocation to bonds and you need less life insurance. So your goal is to figure out from this article, why in the world would they recommend that? It has to do with volatility, correlations, human capital, discount rates. You got to bring all that in there. And that really is the hardest part of this first part, is getting all of that. Some of it is more straightforward than others. So we're going to do this probably next Tuesday. So this weekend, read this article. But I want you to set up in your mind what you're looking for. Okay. Questions on that? Now, you'll notice in the paper itself, I don't ask you to go through all the case studies. It's there in my outline, but I don't ask you to actually go through all the case studies. I think some of the case studies are a little confusing, actually, the way they write them up. I think their wording is a little tricky. But now, they did overly simplify this, and that's one reason they said they need more research. They're only looking at stocks and treasuries, and they're only looking at 1-year life insurance. They're not looking at 5-year term or 10-year term. And so you might get a radically different answer. They also say maybe our utility function is wrong. Maybe we can find, we're finding that humans don't think about utility the way economists think we do. So there may be other things going on. So I don't really mind that. If I were to have you watch that MIT class, I think you'd find really quickly that he's going off on the deep end, that it's not important to this class, but it's really, really fascinating. He goes into these tangents of human capital and kids, and good parents and bad parents, and how much money should a parent invest into a kid for human capital, and what does that mean for poor parents versus rich parents, and private. He talks about some stuff that is incredibly sensitive. You can tell his class is starting to squirm with some of the questions he's asking, because when you actually put the numbers down and you express in formulas what we know about different groups of people, you come to some conclusions that are very, very quite awkward, quite uncomfortable. This article doesn't quite get there. They're not quite as controversial as what he was saying, but I found it really fascinating. Now, there could be some errors in the math, and that's the thing they're saying is we've got some assumptions in here you may disagree with, but given the assumptions we've made, this is what this implies. So if you don't like what's implied, then you have to kind of think, well, what's wrong with their assumptions? Very few people would say a stockbroker should have a low allocation to the stock market. You would say, well, she's a stockbroker. She knows stocks. That's her career. You would think she'd buy a lot of stocks. Well, they don't have anything in their model about your knowledge of the markets. They just say a stockbroker has a high correlation to the stock market. They have a very volatile income. They don't need that volatility in their portfolio as well. They've already got the volatility in their human capital. Their human capital is very stock-like. So therefore, if their human capital is very stock-like, their wealth needs to be more bond-like. All right, so most people's human capital is more bond-like. So what does that mean for young people? They can buy a lot more in stocks because they already have a lot in bonds, because that's what their human capital is. Okay, so you kind of see where this article is going, but they're ignoring something as far as knowledge of the markets. So a stockbroker might say, I don't care, your model says I should have a small allocation to stocks. I know the stock market, I'm going to invest in it. They ignore that. So there's some things in their model that's not covered. All right, but it's an intriguing article. All right. The second article, just real quickly, there's not much to it. It's very, very short, but it brings up a concept I find really, really fascinating. And I actually only gave you the part of the article that you need. It's really on the first page, and it really starts here. So they make 2 points in this article, and this is probably the most missed part of this first part. The first thing they talk about in detail is why young people should have stocks and older people should have more in bonds. And so you have to get that. And the second thing they talk about that I find really, really fascinating is this concept of optionality. I love this concept. Human capital having options. When you're young, you have more options in your human capital than when you're older. So Lindy, I was talking about, this actuary takes my job. So actuaries have a lot more optionality than finance majors. An actuary can become a finance person, but a finance person can't become an actuary. It's just not going to work. I don't know anyone that became an actuary at age 40. It's not going to happen, right? You got to take 10, 15 years of exams. You're just not going to do it. But an actuary had no trouble taking my job, taking the CFA exam. He passed the actual exams and he passed the CFA exam. That's pretty impressive. A lot more optionality. What does it mean to have more optionality? So the more optionality you have in your job. So what are you doing right now for your human capital optionality? Where are you going to college? That increases your optionality dramatically versus someone that dropped out of high school. So you have a lot more options. What does that mean? Now, I don't like their conclusion. We'll talk about why I like the concept, but I disagree with their conclusion. And I'll give you my side of the argument, but I like the concept of optionality. So what he's saying is human capital is like a bond with options. So it's a very unusual asset class. And given that human capital is a bond, for most people, a stockbroker, it might be more like a stock. Or for most people, most of us, our human capital looks more bond-like than stock-like, but it's a bond that has options tied to it. That's very intriguing when it comes to what you should do with your investments for your retirement, right? When you're doing your investing for retirement, you're supposed to consider all of your assets, right? Put them all together, and that's going to influence what you do on the asset side. So, so it's an intriguing concept. All right. So this weekend, you can see it's not that much, especially if you can ignore the appendix on the first article, and you only have to do this one page on this article. Okay. I don't know when this thing was written. It's been a long time too. 2010. It's over a decade old. I've never found anyone else having this discussion. The option side is not covered at all in that first article, and I find it really, really quite important. Options are always important. They're always a major part of your investing. In life insurance itself, we may talk about this. When you buy life insurance, you are buying an option. Lindy, you probably heard this word a lot. What do they call the revenue for an insurance company? What's the word they use? Starts with a P.
Premium.
Premium, right? What do you call the revenue on an option? Premium, right? So life insurance, auto insurance, these are options. You're buying an option. And if you have a car accident, you have the right to sell your car to the insurance company for its cash value. If you die, you have the right to sell your dead body, I guess, to the life insurance company for $500,000, right? You can only sell it in that case, but it's an amazing thing. What do you know about options? You buy an option on the stock market and it shoots up 10%. You can make 40,000% in a weekend. I remember I was up 10,000% in one weekend on an option. It's amazing things. Life insurance, you can pay a $50 premium. You drop dead the next day and your relatives get $500,000. That's an option. That's an incredible thing, right? You pay $50 and your estate gets $500,000. An amazing thing. So options are very, very important. And I love this discussion. All right. So this weekend, working out on Thursday, I'll let you out early because this is such a late class on the first class. So Thursday, we're going to talk about the economics of life insurance and the industry. But then next Tuesday, we're going to talk about the first two articles. Okay. And I'll put that in my Friday email. All right. That's it for me. If you want to stay around and talk, or if you have questions, let me know.